Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. It is now episode 7, and we are plugging along. We're doing good things. We just came off of a 3-part series of higher power. So now we're going to hit you with resentment. Now that you got your higher power aspect and you got the all feel good stuff and realize that there's something else out there bigger than you, let's go ahead and talk about how people hate each other. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry, I messed with the filters and now I look green. I don't know. We'll figure it out, right? But regardless, we're going to jump into a very big one. This is the one that everyone struggles with resentment. And as an addict alcoholic, we learned that that's our number one offender. We learned that it's a difficult obstacle to overcome. But as you know, normal people, day in and day out, I mean, think about how many times you've been resentful over the course of your life. A lot of psychologists will call this like poison of the mind. This is one that really sinks its hooks in to a lot of people. And it's an easy way to fall. It's an easy way to go to a very dark place, to start to change your behavior, who you are, and also to change chemically. We'll talk a little bit about that. We may go into the neurological aspect of it later on. But right now, this is just an overview. We're going to talk about, what it is, what it looks like, the results of having resentment, and then ultimately, solution to it. The resentment is definitely something that runs rampant in a lot of our lives, but let's just go ahead and get into it. We'll talk about it, see what happens. Again, as always, I would love to hear from you guys. A lot of you have done an incredible job and a service to me of reaching out and talking about these episodes with me. It helps me see it from a different perspective, your point of view, because I'm only coming off of my point of view. I'm coming from my perspective, and this is supposed to be a versatile platform. I want to be able to reach out to a lot of different people. And the best way to do that is to hear from you. So feel free to reach out to me. We've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got Instagram. I'm not super active on all of it. YouTube, comment on YouTube, whatever you want to do. But I've also got my email. So let's dive into resentment. So what is resentment? Resentment is, by the Oxford Dictionary definition, it's bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. The big part about that is the very beginning where it says bitter, and then the very end, treated unfairly. This is going to be, resentment is a response mechanism, right? And so you become very bitter when you feel like you have been unjustly treated, when something's not fair. A lot of us are different in this aspect. For me, I don't know if you do the Enneagram stuff, but like I'm an Enneagram type 8. So one of my biggest determining factors for stability is justice. Now, when I'm healthy, I'll seek that in the right ways. When I'm unhealthy, I think that I'm judge, jury, and executioner, and that's not the case. So, bitter indignation of having been treated unfairly. Resentment is also a complex emotion that is a buildup of negative feelings like anger, frustration, and disappointment. It's a reaction to being mistreated or wronged. So these emotions that stem from a resentment, anger, frustration, and disappointment. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, who is this really affecting the most? If you're resentful at somebody, is it hurting them because you're angry, frustrated, and disappointed? You can eventually turn that into hurting them, but it's killing you. It's a poison for your mind, for your soul. It's poisonous to your system, right? And like we said earlier, this is a reaction to being mistreated or wronged. So resentment's a bitter indignation of having been treated unfairly. It's complex emotion that is a buildup of negative feelings like anger, frustration, and disappointment. It's a reaction to being mistreated or wronged. Some characteristics of resentment are the feeling of unfairness, and this is solely based on perception that something is unfair. So that's a big one to pay attention to. Hold on in the back of your mind. Hold on to that fact in the back of your mind throughout. This is a perception-based emotion, right? This is also a characteristic is defense mechanism, which is going to be against the unfair situations. So like we said, this is a reaction. Something unfair happens to me. My immediate defense mechanism is I'm going to get resentful. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to get disappointed. It's this feeling of unfairness based on my perception, okay? Another characteristic is a combination of emotions, which we already alluded to at the beginning, but it's anger, bitterness, disgust, disappointment, disapproval. All of these can start to circulate and create this resentment, okay? And then another characteristic of resentment is withdrawing or acting out. We're going to go into that a little bit later here, but you pretty much are running into a fork in the road where you're having the option to act out on your resentment, which is probably never really good unless you're doing it in a healthy way, or the alternative is avoiding, which then puts you in a spiral of more resentment. It becomes very poisonous, right? We're going to talk about that here in a second. So that's what resentment is. Again, bitter indignation of having been treated unfairly. This is a reaction to being wronged. It's a complex emotion that is a buildup of negative feelings like anger, frustration, and disappointment. And the characteristics of it: feeling of unfairness, defense mechanism, combination of emotions like anger, bitterness, disgust, disappointment, and disapproval, and then withdrawing or acting out. Okay. So a quick overview of the results of what it looks like to have resentment. You're going to damage relationships. That's a given. Anybody who's close to you, anybody who cares for you, who looks up to you, whatever the case may be. If you're a parent, the resentment that you may have with somebody else can bleed over into how you deal with your children. If you're a husband or a wife, you can have your negative feelings and emotions, your anger, bitterness, disgust, whatever it is, can oftentimes bleed over into how you're treating your spouse. And then there's going to be this breakdown of your relationships because people are tired of being treated like that. No one wants to be around someone who's negative all the time. And I can say that because I've been that person, negative all the time, looking at the world negatively because I was so resentful at everything. So you get to this mentality that, everything is terrible, everything is wrong. And you've listened to these people, these nihilistic human beings, and I've been this too. I'm not pointing the finger, but these people that everything is gloom and doom all the time. You can't ever say anything happy. You have these, you have your own family and your kids, and you're bragging about something that your kid did. You're real excited because your kid got, straight A's or they achieved something incredible, and you're just wanting to share it. And then the immediate response from that person is, well, what about me? Or, oh, we'll just wait for the other shoe to fall. And it's just this constant negativity, right? That's someone who's harboring a lot of resentment. So damaged relationships is definitely up there. Another one is the mental and physical health issues. And this one is where we would get more into the neurological side of it. And you can look at how chemically your brain is altered from holding on to resentments. Hormonally, it does just awful, awful things. But this is stemmed from the other result, which is chronic anger. And chronic anger, what that does from a psychological sense is it puts you in a state of fight or flight all the time. You're staying in this fight or flight mode, and that can change your heart rate, that can change your blood pressure, that can change your immune response system. And we do this a lot to ourselves, right? Again, if you go back to this is a perception-based emotion. So I'm resentful because I was treated unfairly. Well, who's to determine whether or not that was unfair? And it may be. A lot of times resentment comes from, let's say, trauma, something that someone did to us where we were wronged, but the perception of it, we're not paying attention to our side of it that much. We just immediately hold on to our perception of things, and then we'll either act out or we'll withdraw. But the results of hanging on to that resentment, the damaged relationships, the mental and physical health issues, and the chronic anger, all of that is going to start to take a toll on your mental and physical health. It keeps you in that fight or flight, right? I'm either going to constantly avoid this, or the moment that someone says something that I don't like, I have this chronic anger where I'm just going to bow up on them, and I'm going to throw it back in their face, and I'm going to get them before they get me again. It's that defense mechanism that we hold on to. And that's where resentment becomes very toxic. As human beings, as living, breathing animals, if you will, we have the natural desire for survival. So even if you're this kind-hearted, sweet, pacifist kind of human being, you can get pushed to a point where the claws will come out. You can get cornered enough. It's like this huge shift that I've had where I used to be the person who, when I was drunk all the time and I hated myself and I hated life and I hated everybody else. You can't love anything because you're not loving yourself. I was good with everybody because I was avoiding what I wanted to do. So I acted like everything was good. But the moment that someone did something to piss me off, immediately the claws came out and I went on the attack. And I was looking for scorched earth too. This wasn't like I'm just going to say something to piss you off. No, I'm going to burn every bridge that I can possibly burn because I'm justified. I'm right. My perception is that I'm being treated unfairly. And that's ultimately what resentment will do. It's going to put you in a psychological corner, if you will. It's going to place you in a position where you're justified with anything that you do because you're the victim. Okay. And this is another thing another episode we have down the pipeline is the victim mentality. But a lot of the resentment that we're going to see here is stemmed from that victim mentality, or the victim mentality is created from the resentment. Either way you want to look at it. So how does all of this work? If you look at history, if you pay attention to any length of history, human beings are capable of doing very, very horrible things to other human beings, right? If you're paying attention to history and you think that human beings were always just peaceful, you're not paying attention to the right history. You're reading it wrong. Human beings are very capable of very awful things to one another, have been for a long time, and it's sickening. I mean, you even look at, let's say medieval times, the ways that they tortured people, the reasons that they tortured people, the fact that they torture at all is fascinating. And not in a good way. It's unreal. We do more damage to ourselves than any other entity outside of the human race. Right? We've always been our biggest enemy in that sense. But once we know what really hurts us as a human being, once I know what actually hurts me, I'm now capable of doing some really bad damage to other people, because I can take what I know is going to cut straight to my heart. I can turn that on to somebody else and I can continue to torture them over and over and over again. And we do this. Men, if you think about this with your spouse, let's say that your spouse lies to you. Let's say they cheat on you. Let's say that they said something that you don't like. If you have this mentality now that you're resentful at them, you, instead of addressing it and talking to it, you avoided that and you just immediately went into fight mode, right? Instead of flight, you went right into fighting. You're going to continue to rake them through the coals over and over again. And that bitterness builds up. And what happens when you are a victim, for one, but also when you're resentful, is you're immediately on that ego swing of putting yourself so much higher than everybody else. I'm justified in acting the way that I want because I'm angry and I'm hurt. My anger and my hurt is my perception, but I'm a victim in that, so I can do whatever I want. They hurt me first. But this is one of those realities that we face as human beings with resentment. When I know what hurts me, when I know what really cuts to my core, I'm going to take that and turn it on somebody else. If I'm resentful and I have chronic anger and I'm all bitter inside, typically what's going to happen. And the sad thing is that we're going to keep others at the brink of this psychological death, if you will. And we're going to keep them right on that. We're going to keep torturing and keep torturing and keep torturing them. We won't kill them off completely, but we're going to keep them at that point where we're keep them alive just so they can continue to be tortured by us. And that's a very sick mentality. As an alcoholic, one of the things that I was notorious for in relationships was I would isolate people. So anybody that I was with, I would isolate them. I would tell them that their family's horrible. I would tell them that their friends are horrible. I'm the only thing that you need. And I would make it that way too, right? Like that was kind of at the beginning, I was the knight in shining armor. I was everything that you ever wanted to be. I was the main character in the Hallmark movies, right? And then all of a sudden, once I got you, once I was able to sink my teeth in, now you're mine. And then I would continue to torture and torture and torture. And it's a very sick form. And all of this stems from resentment, from victim mentality, and the ego swing of thinking that I'm better than everybody else. But if I look at it at the root of it, I'm so insecure with myself. I hate myself so much that I'm willing to inflict harm and pain on somebody else. And that's where we're not paying attention to our side of it, right? So when you're in that resentment cycle, when you're in that victim mentality, you get to this point where you're going to continue to psychologically torture somebody to the brink of them breaking, but you're going to not push it too far because you want to continue to torture. And again, go back and look at history. This has been something that has gone on with people groups for millennia, and it's wild to me how we still do it. I mean, obviously we don't, maybe not torture chambers and, medieval times and castles and dungeons and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, we're still doing it. I did that in my own home. I was married for 5 years, and I freaking psychologically tortured my ex-wife. I did this to girlfriends too. I was so insecure with myself, and I was so resentful and bitter at everything. And it wasn't even directly resentful at them. It was being resentful at something else, but I carried that over. And this is the sickness of the resentment, right? This is why I keep saying, or I'm going to keep saying, that it's like a poison to the mind. And like Carl Jung is one of the guys that, as someone who's pursuing a career in psychology, I pay attention to a lot of Carl Jung's stuff. And he talks about how the pathway to higher wisdom is through the terrible portal of hell. And what that means for me is there's a lot of angles to that. And I think, like, for me, as being the monster that I was, being the resentful, evil, chronic anger human being that I was, to have grown from that and put in a lot of work to not be that human being anymore. A lot of my wisdom that I have now comes from the evil being that I was, right? Or what I was choosing to be. Also, as someone who grew up with an abusive father, I was molested by a babysitter. I have a manipulative, emotionally abusive mother. You get to this point where you can either stay in that and you can become a product of that, or you can bounce on the other side of it, which, again, I will say this over and over again. One of the best things that my parents ever gave me was their dysfunction. It taught me, one, how not to be, but it also helped me navigate through all of that fire. I'm born from the ashes of trauma in that sense, and not to be overly dramatic and Shakespearean, but like Carl Jung was saying, through that hell, I gained wisdom. And that wisdom is different than knowledge. We've talked about this in a previous episode. I can go read a book and gain knowledge. I could watch a YouTube video and gain knowledge. The wisdom comes from the experience of actually having done it and having gone from one side of it, been that bad person, to coming into the other side of it where I'm able to be a healthy husband. I'm able to love myself. I'm able to have a connection with my higher power. These are things that incite wisdom. And now I have that. And this is the hard part about resentment. Is oftentimes it's more comfortable to stay in that chaos. We have too much of an ego. We want to maintain our pride. For what? Who are you? Are you so special? That you can't let people see you apologize? Oh my gosh, you're so tough. People respect human beings who apologize and who own their shit, But that's what Carl Jung is saying, is through the hell, through the nonsense, through the chaos comes that wisdom, right? So now we get to that point of, like, being resentful that typically grows from two things, or two things need to happen from being resentful, right? You either need to grow the hell up and accept responsibility. That's one. Grow the hell up and accept responsibility. Get closer. Grow the hell up and accept responsibility. If you have resentment, we're going to talk about that here in a second. Or someone may be actually oppressing you. There may actually be someone who is causing you so much harm that resentment is building slowly but surely. Maybe you're not trying to hang on to it, but it's building. And you have something to say, or you have something that you need to do that you're not saying or you're not doing. Okay? And this is very difficult because oftentimes, if you are with someone or around someone who's toxic enough to be oppressing you, to be causing you harm, and you're building resentment based on that, oftentimes, if you're going to be the bigger person and bring it to their attention and say, this is bothering me, this needs to stop, you're going to be met with backlash. Okay. So we tend to avoid instead of confronting. We have this huge culture now, especially with my generation, the Gen Zers, all this kind of stuff, where we just constantly avoid. We're more like a screen FaceTime kind of person. We don't have face to face communication. People are scared of that, right? People are scared of healthy confrontation or confrontation in general. But if you get to this point where someone's oppressing you and you've built resentment off of that and you bring it up to them, then you're going to quickly learn over and over again, if that bothers you, if it hurts you, you're going to start to avoid. And what happens when we avoid, and this is a big one, what happens when we avoid something that we need to do or something that we need to say, it's going to slowly but surely turn into a desire for revenge. And that revenge takes you to one of the darkest places that you can go. It's going to be poisonous. It's going to be mayhem, because now you're seeking to do harm. And this is somebody I used to be. I used to be the kind of person where if you hurt me, if you harmed me or bothered me, I'm going to deconstruct your entire life without you even knowing it at first. I did this for a long time. When I was drinking and people would call me out for my poor behavior, whether it be an ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, a friend, whatever the case may be, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to blow up in your face. I'm going to let you know how I feel. And then for the next month, I'm going to research and learn every single thing about you. I'm going to learn your schedule. I'm going to learn your work situation. I'm going to learn your family situation. And then I'm going to slowly but surely start planting these seeds of negativity in hopes that it just crumbles below you. That is an evil bastard. And that's who I was. 100%. Versus now, we can get into the personal story aspect of it. Like, for instance, I'm coming up on 4 years of sobriety, and I've been married now for a while. We have a kid on the way, and as I grew, but before I got married and before I got sober, my mom, who we talked about, is very emotionally damaging. Has been to all of her kids, but there was this time where she had full control over me, because I needed somebody. I couldn't take care of myself. So she got me into rehab and she gave me a home and she paid for this and paid for that. But that's the way that my mom is that she will do things for you because she wants to seem altruistic. I don't think she's evil. I don't think she has a bad heart. I think that she just has a skewed view of how to handle it, because she will constantly bring up the fact that she put me in rehab, and she'll constantly bring up the fact that she did things for you. It's not out of the kindness of her heart all the time. It's because she wants the attention. Because one of the things I learned when I came back is realizing that she was telling everybody that she got me into rehab and all of the stuff that she had to go through. And it was all about me, 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 as opposed to my son got sober. My son was at the brink of death and he's sober. And again, this isn't trying to throw anybody under the bus. This is just trying to help you understand the aspect of resentment. Now, fast forward to almost 4 years of sobriety later, and I've been living 5 minutes from her. And it's this quick shift where all of a sudden resentment comes back up, or maybe she's had resentment this whole time. But I realized after I've been here, I haven't relied on her financially, haven't relied on her for anything since I've been married. There's a lot of this. I start finding out that she's saying things behind my back, and it wouldn't bother me as much with her telling other people whatever she wants to say, but it's my siblings. She'll talk about my sibling or talk about me to my siblings in a negative way, and then they'll talk to me about it. And that's never okay for a parent, right? You never want to do that, because now you're skewing the view that your siblings have with one another. But that's also a manipulative control aspect. And so I confronted her about this. And the first thing is the typical narcissistic triad, where it's the immediate denial, and then it's the gaslighting, and then it goes into the plea bargain of like, well, what do we have to do to get over this? Well, so going back to what this is, someone is oppressing you and you have something to say or do about it. I was building resentment, and I don't hold on. I don't want that resentment anymore. It's my number one offender. That's the first thing that's going to get me loaded, So I brought it to their attention. I said, this is hurting me and I want this to stop right now. What do we have to do? And when it was met with the hostility and the negativity, that's where it becomes difficult, because now you have to draw your boundary of saying, okay, I'm doing my part, so I'm not holding on to bitter resentment, because that only affects me. It doesn't affect anybody else. But through that, I learned that they're holding on to their resentment. And it's tough to deal with people who are doing that. So you can hang on to that resentment. And if I would have held on to it, and if I would have continued to let her muddy the waters and burden the relationship that I have with my siblings, then that resentment, with me avoiding the confrontation of that, that would have quickly turned into a revenge aspect. Because I have, and I'm not doing this for blackmail, but I have plenty of dirt on my mom that would completely change everyone's opinion of her, right? That's not who I am. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to be that person, you know? But to take that and to say, okay, I'm going to confront the issue. I'm going to put it out there, and that's all you can do. All you can do is that, right? You can't control how other people are going to react. You can't control how they're going to respond, and you can't control anything beyond that point other than how you respond to it. So I put that out there, and it was rejected immediately. It was immediately turned back on me, which let me know immediately, okay, that's where they're at. That's all I need to know. So now boundaries are drawn. But when we avoid, it would have turned into a revenge aspect. And that's the hard thing for us with resentment. We get into this mindset, someone hurt me. And instead of being the bigger person and sitting down and reflecting on why it hurt, how can I formulate these thoughts and ideas into letting them know that it hurt, we will hang on to it. Because a lot of us like chaos. It's more comfortable. That's all we know, maybe. And like for me, growing up in a home with an abusive father and an emotionally abusive mother, like chaos is what I know. It's comfortable there. I thrive in that, or I feel like I do. I think that I thrive, but everything else has fallen apart. So it's not really thriving. But if I would have avoided all of that, it would have turned into a revenge. And that revenge, it's only going to hurt me because now I'm trying to hurt other people. And then I hate myself even more. So this is the hard part to break with resentment. So again, if you're resentful about something, you either need to grow the hell up and accept responsibility, or someone's actually oppressing you and you have something to say or do about it. Okay? There's something that you need to do and you're avoiding it. So that resentment's going to grow. So, Michael, what about all this nonsense? Where's the solution to it? Well, good thing you made it this far because we have a solution for you. The solution to this is not easy. It's a process, just like anything else is emotionally, psychologically. The process for this is going to be growth, and it's going to be hard work, and it's going to be constantly pushing yourself to see things from a different perspective. Now, if you go back to the last 3 episodes, we talked about the higher power. Where are you gaining your perspective? Are you gaining your perspective from TikTok? Are you gaining your perspective from any Joe Blow off the street that has an opinion about what you're saying? Or are you gaining your perspective from your higher power, from what you know? Like for me, the baseline for me, the guidebook is the Bible, right? My higher power, being a Christian, is what God allows me to see. So I'm not going to go to some random person that I barely know and ask them what their opinion is, and then all of a sudden that's my perspective. I'm going to work to continue to learn what my perspective is. So the solution is, here we go. You ready? Here's your answer. You have got to get closer, please. You have got to free yourself from whatever it is that's oppressing you. And it could be a person, it could be a thing, whatever it is. You don't have to assume that you're right, but you do have to say what you're thinking. Find a way to say it in a loving way. Find a way to say it in an honest way. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't beat around the bush. But you have got to get free from whatever it is that's oppressing you. This is tough because that can mean, like what I told you in my story, this could mean that that's going to be setting healthy boundaries with family members, which is going to initially feel like a loss of a family member because they're not going to change because you set that boundary. They're not going to respect you. They don't respect you. But for you, you have to respect yourself. And like for me, I have to respect my wife and my child. I have to respect what we have. So setting that boundary, getting away from what's oppressing me, is one of the first things that you have to do. One thing that I would say too, the next step of this is finding accountability. Lean in on people who are close to you. Lean in on people that you can trust. This could be, like if you're an addict alcoholic, a sponsor. This could be a best friend. This could be someone who you know you can rely on their perspective of things. If you tap in, if you have a relationship with your higher power, I believe that God speaks through people to me. It's not always what I want to hear, but it's a way for me to see it from a different perspective. You have to find a way when you gain that accountability to stumble towards your realizations and let the person listening tell you if you're off or not, right? And this is a practice thing. Again, you got to have close people in your lives. If it's your spouse, if it's a girlfriend, whatever it is, if it's but it needs to be someone who's close. And obviously, if someone's life is chaotic and someone is being a malicious asshole, it's probably not the person you need to be talking to about this, right? People are scared of what they don't know, so we take the easier route and stay around those who think the same way, which is not growth at all. You can have friends that have similarities. You're going to have like-minded people in your life. But if you're just a pissed off, chronically angry human being, and so is your friend, and that's the person that you're constantly going to for assistance and accountability and whatever the case may be, then how are you ever going to grow from that? We have such a hard time of hanging on to what we already know. We protect it and we guard it, and this is what we know. But like Jordan Peterson talks about this too when he's talking about wrestling with monsters. The dragon, I think is the way that he puts it in his book, the dragons that you're going to fight. Go into the unknown. That's what you have to do. And like for me, every single day, I'm constantly challenging myself to go into the unknown, see things from a different perspective. I don't know how to forgive. What are some good ways that the Bible teaches me how to forgive? I don't know how to forgive. How can I talk to this friend who has figured out a way to not hold on to resentments forever? How can I ask them? Like, go into this unknown realm where now you're learning and growing and moving out of it. Because like we're going back to Carl Jung, the wisdom that you're going to gain is going to be going through the fires of hell sometimes. So you have to free yourself from the oppression. You have to find some level of accountability. This could even be a pastor, or a priest or whatever it is for you. But free yourself from whatever it is that's oppressing you. Find the accountability. And here's the one that you all aren't going to like, but I'm going to say it, and you better listen. You better listen real good. Forgiveness. This is a big one. Forgiveness. That is the ultimate way to get to the point where you no longer harbor resentment. When my family rejected what I said, when I told them that what you're doing is causing me and my wife harm, when they immediately rejected that and put the blame on me and brought up all of my past sins and tried to find ways to tell me that I'm a bad person, the resentment was there immediately. I wanted to mow them down because I have things that I could say that would just break them. I have proof that I could throw out there that would dismantle any type of connection that they have. And I don't want to be that person. So I had to work through that in that moment, saying a prayer of like, God, please let me forgive these people. It's the same thing that, like, look at what Jesus did on the cross. In the midst of being crucified, he asked God to forgive them, for they know not what they do. Okay. So this is letting go of that resentment, because I'm not going to burn up because somebody else has a problem. I'm not going to sit here and cook myself because someone else has an issue. I'm going to continue to live my life. I'm going to be happy and grow. So the forgiveness has to be the priority in letting go of the resentment. How do we forgive? What are some easy ways to do it? Okay, here we go. One experience at a time. Don't sit here and think that you're going to unload everything and unpack everything and figure it all out right then and there. One experience at a time. Then examine the experience. Take a look at it. What are all the elements of it? Process the emotions that are involved in that experience. Okay? And then acknowledge the truth of what you've done. Pay attention to what you've done. This is big. And even if it's not outrageous and glaring, you still have done something. Even if it's in your mind, fussing them out, going and talking to other people about how crappy they are, whatever it is, you still did something. So pay attention to that. Take responsibility for your actions once you do that. Okay, this is a big one. And this is what separates boys from men, from girls from women. Like, this is what maturity looks like. And then you make amends. When you've wronged somebody, you've done something wrong, you go through the whole process, one experience at a time, examine the experience, process the emotions involved, acknowledge the truth of what you've done, take responsibility, and then make the amends. Amends is different from an apology. Amends is saying, I acknowledge what I did. I know that what I did was wrong. How else did I hurt you? Listen to them tell you that. And then the next step is, moving forward, this is what I'm going to do. And that's a promise that you're going to keep. Moving forward, I'm no longer going to do this anymore. I'm going to work to not do this anymore. And that's your process. In Ephesians 4:31 through, oh gosh, guys, wrong page. In Ephesians 4:31 through 32, I want to just talk about real quick what it says about resentment. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. That's pretty straightforward. Just straight up say it. And then you have Matthew 5:22. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. You can read that however you want, but that's pretty intense. Forgiveness is the key to all of this. You're not talking behind people's backs. You're going to go talk to that person. You're not going to call them a fool for saying that they did something or they harmed you or you harmed them or whatever the case may be. But the forgiveness aspect of this is huge. And then if we get into the big book on page 64, resentment is the number one offender. Number one. Okay. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Resentment will get you loaded, period. If you're an addict alcoholic, resentment will get you loaded. Buckle up for that one. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves, why were we angry? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. So this is where the grudge comes from. Everybody wronged us. Poor, pitiful me. Where's your part in it, right? List it out. Put it out there. Actually explore it. Nobody said that it's wrong to ask why. Figure out what it is that's actually hurting you. And then page 552, he said, in effect, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will pray for the person or thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything that you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. So this is another thing of the humility aspect. Put it into perspective. Pray for the people that you're resentful at, okay? This gets you in this mindset of still, in the servant mindset of like, I just want them to be okay. I've had to do this with my family. I took a step back. I don't hate them. I'm not even mad at them anymore. I feel bad for them, and I pray for them. And I say, okay, please, God, help them with the clarity. Help them to see what you want them to see. Because I know for a fact that resentment is not from God. Resentment, angerness, bitterness, the avoidance, the withdrawal, it's not from God. So what do? Set boundaries, take a step back. Okay, all I can do is pray for them because I can't force them to see things, right? So this is resentment. This is an overview of resentment. And we can definitely get into it more. We could definitely talk about it more, and we probably will, because this is a big one. This is one that constantly comes up. Most of the guys that I know that get loaded and relapse are the ones that have some level of resentment. This happens a lot with people who grew up in traumatic situations. It happens a lot with people who, aren't working a program like they should. Their eyes are not on God. And that resentment is easy to hang on to because that's something tangible. Now I can be mad. Now I can hate. Now I can, we want to breathe fire sometimes, and it's not okay. But I hope that if you have resentment, if you're burdened by it, if it is causing some level of spiritual malady, feel free to reach out. We'll talk about it. We'll get to a solution one way or the other. We'll help you out with that. As always, I love you guys. Thank you so much for this ride, this journey. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for all of you who comment, who respond, reply, like, share. All of it helps. I thank you so much. Kisses and hugs from me. Keep your head up, keep your heart open, and go help somebody. We'll catch you next time.